The NSPCA says it is on high alert as a bulk animal carrier will dock in East London to transport thousands of livestock. Now, reports are suggesting that thousands of sheep, around 1,500 cattle and goats are destined for slaughter in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Let's get more details now and how exactly this can be done safely. We speak to Jacques Peacock, PR and legal liaison at the National Council of SPCAs. Jacques, thank you so much for your time this evening. Firstly, has the carrier docked?
Good evening, and thank you so much for having us. We can confirm that the Al Masila vessel has docked in the East London harbour this morning. However, this is not our first interaction with this case. Our team has been at the feedlot in Berlin since last week already, busy screening the animals that are bound for this vessel of terror.
And what did they find?
So, as you've said, it is quite a large amount of animals with around 58,000 sheep, 200 goats and around 1,500 head of cattle. It really is a large amount of animals, and per the guidelines which the exporter has vowed to adhere to, the sheep ought to be shorn before they embark on the vessel, at least 10 days before, and they are currently still shearing. That has obviously resulted in an extremely hasty approach to the shearing, which then goes hand in hand with cruel practices, with the skins being nicked, animals being cut, and then those injured animals being expected to go.
Jacques? All right, it does look like Jacques' picture there is frozen, but we will try to get him back as we talk about, some of the critical aspects of this conversation. I mean, right now, listening to the, what he's describing as a hasty shearing of the animals. And it has, of course, raised their eyebrows because he has been, the NSPCA says it's not the first time that they're dealing with this particular case. You listen to the fact that they're talking about the fact that they've been monitoring this particular vessel since Berlin. So the storage of these particular animals is also going to be under scrutiny right now, and hopefully as we have this conversation, we also get a sense of how exactly are the animals expected to be transported, particularly when they're in such large numbers and they're headed to probably a country that is further away. So what do you do? What are the correct ways? But also importantly, should they find that things are not above board here, what then happens in that particular situation? And are they then able to block the vessel from moving, further on, or do they then make sure that, that vessel continues but under strict supervision? So who exactly is involved here? And Jacques, I do understand that you're back with us right now. We were talking about something that sounded like it's concerning from your end, which you were saying is the hasty shearing of the animals. Let's talk about that. Let's pick up from there.
Indeed, the hasty shearing has resulted in sheep being nicked, cut, and those injured sheep then being expected to endure this 3-week-long journey to the Middle East. We have seen laymen, who are the shearers, relentlessly trying to stitch up these animals in an attempt to get them on board. Aside from that, and despite assurances by the farmers to the exporter that no pregnant ewes would be allowed on the ship, we have encountered a birth of a lamb on the feedlot as well as a miscarriage. That clearly indicates that there are pregnant animals on the feedlot, which is completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated. The NSPCA has now resorted to, at its own expense, to fly in a veterinarian with equipment to scan the animals via sonar to ensure that no pregnant animal is boarded on the vessel.
So it sounds like you're doing something on the one end, but then before I even ask you what the correct way of transporting animals, especially if they're in large numbers like this, is to be done, but let's talk a little bit about what you're saying. So if you then are providing this, what becomes some of the sanctions that, those who are operating the vessels, transporting the animals, or the companies can then face should there be problems like what you're raising?
So it is important to understand that this is not a service that we are providing to the exporter, but that we are on the feedlot under warrant. And in the last week, we had extremely hostile situations, including a physical altercation from the feedlot personnel who have clearly attempted to intimidate our staff and hindering them in doing their duties. As a non-profit organization, that is obviously extremely strenuous to have a team at the feedlot and from tomorrow morning at the harbour as well, screening these animals. As a law enforcement body and as a statutory body created in terms of the law, the NSPCA has a demonstrated history that we will not hesitate to prosecute any person who contravenes the Animals Protection Act. And that has clearly been demonstrated in these live export matters too. Last year, we had the horrendous incident where the feedlot manager was arrested at the feedlot for horrendously cutting off the horns of rams who were too large in terms of the guidelines to board the vessel. And we continue to pursue that prosecution, and we will not hesitate to do the same if incidents are found where the Animals Protection Act is contravened in this sense.
So what can you tell us now? I mean, we know that you say that there were other, pregnant animals that were also being transported, and that concern on that part. But what else have you been able to establish about the condition of some of the livestock that's being transported?
Our teams are still in the process of screening, which has been made difficult by the strenuous self-imposed timeline of the exporter. They too are still busy shearing, which is way beyond their own self-imposed timeline, which makes our job difficult because we still need to ensure that every animal is screened, not only in terms of pregnancy, but in terms of general welfare and well-being in terms of the Animals Protection Act. So we still have a long way to go, and then once the loading starts, the screening continues in terms of loading onto the vessel and on the vessel itself in terms of handling and the well-being of the animals to see if there are any contraventions in terms of the Animals Protection Act. You can imagine with such a magnitude of animals, there is bound to be animal welfare concerns, and the NSPCA has long maintained that there is no country in the world who can adequately and humanely export live animals by sea in a correct way, as it is referred to. It really is impossible, and there are bound to be welfare concerns. That is why the NSPCA has been in ongoing litigation since as early as 2019 to ban the live export of animals by sea from South Africa, because we are really only used as a second option. Australia has a ban in place during the warm summer months to prevent animals being exported from Australia and to prevent heat stress. So we are being used as a reroute when that ban is in effect, and thereby the exporters get to flout Australian regulations in that regard.
And of course, briefly then, Jacques, what happens then, especially if this is not the correct mode? What is the correct mode?
The NSPCA has long called for the export of animals in carcass form. We do understand and appreciate that there may be religious components to the slaughtering of animals, but everything that you do needs to be done humanely, and that is what the law says. Okay. So the NSPCA has always advocated for the export of carcasses instead.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacques, for your time. And I guess then we'll wait once your team is done with, the checkings and everything, and checking the conditions of the animals as well. And then we get an update from yourself to see how you proceed with this particular matter. Do appreciate that update. That was Jacques Peacock, PR and legal liaison at the National Council of SPCAs.